Hey, so what's going on, guys? My name is Dustin, and I'm here to tell you guys a little bit about me. Basically, it's a series where I talk a little bit about this and that throughout my life, throughout the course and history of the existence of iPhone Star for Hire, all the way up until now, where you guys hear a lot of good things about my current time, YouTube, so on and so forth. But right now, we're in the age group of 6, 7 years old, somewhere around there. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. This one's pretty much going to be absorbed and wrapped around one giant burrito, one dad burrito, where we're going to talk about my daddy issues. And, hopefully some of you guys could relate. If not, you guys can also check. If you guys have not seen the previous other episodes, I think this is number 4. You can check the other 3 down below. I have a playlist set up. If there's any of them you've missed at all, go check them out and support them. You guys have been like jonesing. Non-stop tweets and comments on all my videos. And, hey, Pone, where's it been? And I'm sorry it's been a few days. But these do take roughly 3 to 4 hours to process, render, and upload for you guys. So understand that I can't do these every day. So without further ado, we're going to hop right into this. Now, about 6, 7 years old, little young impressionable Dustin was spent a lot of time at my dad's. My mom and dad were never married. During this period, they kind of broke up. My dad really had relationship issues. Basically, he cared about people, but his dick wanted vagina. That's kind of what happened. He threw every woman under. He just didn't care about anyone. Every woman he's ever been with, he's cheated on. And that's all I heard. I mean, and things get crazy throughout these years. Now, I remember a couple good things about my father. Before we go any further, understand that a lot of this is about feelings. A lot of this is about how I felt only as a child, but I'll try to clear it up a little bit more now that I'm an adult and can understand some of the things that he did. But growing up, I had a lot of issues with my dad, a lot of problems. When I was younger and, gullible and everything like that, when I was 6 and 7 years old, I absolutely loved my dad. He was my hero. You know how that is. You just know how that is. Good or bad. You don't see the bad. You see beyond that when you're that young. And, I was in elementary school and I've watched him, my process, the routine. And this was seriously like never broken every weekend. Every Friday I'd come over at 6 o'clock because it was visiting. I'd go over to my father's every other weekend. That's the visiting that we'd have because my mom and grandmother pretty much took care of me others on the other days of the month. So during this period, my father would have me for basically 4 days out the month. I'd be dropped off at 6 p.m. on Friday and go home at 6 p.m. on Sunday. So an entire 48 hours. And that's kind of, the process. Now, during this process, I'd come over Friday night. He'd order pizza. Nothing would pretty much done. I basically go over there to go to bed. That's all that happened. So I'd sleep on the couch. I didn't have a bed or a room over there, anything like that. So during this period, I'd go over there, we'd have pizza every Friday night, and that's kind of what it would be. He'd get drunk and play on the computer, and then come time, Saturday, he'd sleep in till 2 or 3, and then we'd be able to maybe talk or hang out, which really didn't happen at all, up until, 7, 8 o'clock, when he got back and just redid the entire, process. He got a couple beers, he started playing on the computer, didn't see him again, so by the time he wakes up at 2 or 3 o'clock on Sunday, I just decided, hey, it's time to go home. So most of my weekends were uneventful. The process was kind of boring, especially for me being a kid. I felt unwanted. He married a woman named Jenny. This woman is my stepmother and is the definition of a biatch. I wish I had nicer words for her. I'm going to use cunt, actually. That's a pretty strong one, right? Women don't like that, right? That's what she was. How she is now, I don't know, and I don't care to waste any time thinking about how she is, but I hated her. And it's not because I didn't want to, but and understand, I was a hyperactive, annoying fucking child. I'm not trying to say I'm a saint. I'm a victim here. That's not how I'm trying to lay myself out to be. But every child is like this. Some kids are just off the wall hyper. Some kids are just disrespectful. Some kids are just saints. You know what I mean? It happens. You never know what you get. It's a roll of the die, bro. And unfortunately, somebody crapped out on me. But it's like, it was a rough period because this woman came into my father's life, and it changed everything. She became extremely controlling. Trust issues came into effect that I did not know about. Like I said, my dad was completely unfaithful. He cheated on her with women, so on and so forth, stuff like this. And of course, she's going to be much more controlling and mean around my father. She's not going to let him do anything. That's the kind of crutch and the control that she had on him. And it was almost painful. She changed my father. In the first few years, I remember hanging out with him. He's the guy that actually introduced me into video games. He helped me with my math. He helped me a lot, actually. He's the guy that taught me multiplication and division. And I remember, studying at the table over there, at the dinner table. We'd hang out. He did that. He had his head on straight for a couple years that I remember, and then things just went south. He started drinking more, which I think is a result of him just not being happy at home with his wife. Their marriage was rocky, has been for the years. They've been recently, I guess, separated for a couple years now. And throughout this period, I was a young kid. I didn't know what was going on. I kind of hid myself from it. And they didn't argue around us. They kind of hide that kind of shit. And I guess the only time I really had any time with my father that he actually felt like it was himself was when he was drunk. And that's not a good experience, I mean, and that's one thing that I realized at a young age, that alcohol is a fucking truth serum. Everything comes out when you're drunk. And it's the only time in my life where I felt like I had my father back. And the weirdest part now, I despise my father, for the reason being is he wasn't a father. He was a friend. And, as cool as that seems as being a child, that seems totally cool, having him as my best friend, you know what I mean? But he wasn't a father. Every kid needs a father. I can't stand when men straight up walk out or want nothing to do with their kids. Now, this is the perfect example of what I like to throw down. People ask about my dad all the time. And it's usually a negative comment that follows. And it's not because I don't love him. It's not because I hate him, because I don't. I'm disappointed. I guess that's the best word to give. And as a kid, he was my best friend. He's the one that got me into video games. He helped me with math. He helped me with a lot of things as a child. And I'm always going to be grateful and thankful for him, actually attempting. But by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, things changed. I saw him sneaking around behind his wife's back, phone cards, calling this woman in Kentucky, because that's where, part of my family's from. I live in Ohio. And so I got to witness this. And, he used to have me, or even her daughter, my stepsister, Serena, he'd have us run out and throw away the phone cards in the neighbors' trash cans and stuff. I mean, he wasn't as sneaky as he'd like to be. But then again, not many men are. They'll brag to guys about these women they slept with. The women are the sneaky ones, that's for damn sure. But it was a rough process because, I thought I was just being fun. I thought I was doing his, things together. And we had lots of cool moments as a kid. I remember going to see One with Jet Li, that movie. And he introduced me into fishing, which to this day has attached to me. It is probably my favorite hobby. If I had to choose between playing video games and fishing the rest of my life, it'd be fishing, no doubt. Some of the most relaxing, soothing things in the world. Just listen to the environment, the world, the earth around you. It's one of the most relieving things in the world, right next to you. It's a nice close second to taking a giant deuce. You know what I mean? A morning deuce is just incredible. So these issues got a little rough. Around 6 to 7 was great. He taught me about video games. He would never let me play when I was younger. My first few years, the moments we did hang out, he used to watch. This is where I got involved in movies as well. He used to watch horror movies, Freddy, Child's Play, stuff like that. So that's what I was raised up on. That vulgar, pervertedness, everything like that. That's kind of probably where I get it from. It's my dad. Up until now, my father actually calls me cock. I've never heard him call me Dustin. Occasionally he calls me son. But a lot of times he just calls me cock or something. That's the kind of relationship that we had growing up. And that's just kind of what it is. So like I said, he was more of a friend than a father, but every child needs a father. And I was always mad at him for, I guess, letting me down. I mean, I was grateful during those young years. We'd play video games. He's the one that got me involved, man. I remember watching him play and beat Doom. It's the first game I ever had nightmares of. And then he went into Resident Evil, and I just eliminated all over the place. I was terrified, but I couldn't help but be next to my father and felt protected, you know what I mean? And it was great times. He's the guy that influenced my video game passion, and by the time I was 6, 7 years old, I started playing for myself. I started picking up games, and then I started hanging out with my friend Josh, and he had the Nintendo 64, started playing Mario Kart, Perfect Dark, and so on and so forth, and eventually it branched into Halo and everything like that. So I guess my passion for gaming and my pervertedness kind of came from my father, and he really didn't have an off switch. I've never seen a serious side of my father, which is kind of a disappointment. I care about the guy, but, he put me through so much as a child. And the worst part, the thing that I cried about night after night after night, was the fact that he would always side with his wife. He would always side with Jenny. And she was a bitch to me. She's choked me out. She's yelled at me. She's made fun of me. this woman never really appreciated me. She never liked me from the start, and she never gave me a chance. And she was one of them women, and this is how a lot of my dad's siblings are actually, is, you know, their kids are the best, everybody else's kids are shit. You know, she thought her daughter was an angel and perfect and everything like this, and I'm not taking anything away from my stepsister Serena, but, you know, she put her kids on the pedestal, and they were super amazing, and I was just some fucking cancerous tumor that was sitting off on the side that's just extra baggage from her husband. And this is also what brought in another concern. My father had another kid, a sister of mine. Her name's Danielle. I remember her from this young age because it was some of the only times that I ever saw her. There were gaps of 4 years, 2 years that I never saw my sister. And it's been 2 or 3 years since I've seen her last again. And she was growing up in a rough area. Her mother slept around, drugs, drinking. That's partially why, you know, I have a kid on the way right now that I want a daughter, because I felt like one of my biggest regrets, one of the biggest things that always, you know, kept me up at night and made me feel like a failure, is that I wanted to be there for my sister. She looked up to me, she cared about me, she loved me. I was the guy to protect her. You know what I mean? Is she attached to me in a different way when we were younger, and I promised her, you know. When I was 10 years old, I was wanting to find a way to adopt her, to save her from her mother, because of all the stories I heard from people and from what I've seen. And, you know, I felt like I was responsible, but when it all came down to it, it was my dad. Now, the issue for being is, like I said, my stepmom had her fangs into him pretty hard, and she basically brainwashed my father, if you will. She told him, hey, you're never going to see her again. That's not your daughter. She was sleeping around with other guys when that happened. So there was never an actual DNA test done. But every time, you know, they tried to get one done, my dad would deny it, which was obviously my stepmother in disguise. But that was a name we weren't allowed to mention, you know. Danielle, my sister's name, was basically the Voldemort kind of deal. No one was allowed to mention her name because it would bring in a wrath of my stepmom. And my father was, I don't think he was afraid of her. He just dealt with her bullshit because, I don't know. I also felt like he was a leech. I mean, he made a decent amount of money, but I felt like he stayed around because he didn't think he could do any better. He took the abuse. And I mean, a lot of it was well-deserved. I mean, when you're unfaithful and you betray somebody, I mean, I understand. But if you can't resolve it, then I guess it's best to separate ways. But during this period, it was hard for me. And it hit me because I couldn't stand that my father would be there for me, but not be there for my sister. And when I did see her, she'd cry and she'd, hey, has he asked about me? And I'd have to sit there and tell her with her eyes so wide, so excited, hopefully wanting to actually hear that her father wanted to see her. I'd have to tell her no. I'm not a person to lie, and that's when I started to hate my father. He was the target that I aimed at. He was the reason for all of my misfortunes and problems. He was the guy that I blamed for my life being so miserable. During this period, you know, I was dealing with school. I was still having fun, but I was diagnosed depressed at a young age. As you guys know, I was a very intelligent child. I was able to catch up and deal with emotions and stuff at a, you know, much quicker pace. And I guess the biggest thing, this is what I often try to explain it to, is it's one thing to, you know, be, you know, mama's boy, be raised by your mom, and never knew who your father is. You know, he could die in a war, he could walk out on you. You never know. I mean, there are unanswered questions there. It's just a void, if you will. But I feel like it's an entirely different thing when your father's right in front of you and wants nothing to do with you. Throughout the next few years, my father wanted nothing to do with me. The routine weekend turned in between. He was so bitter with his home life. The routine weekend turned into, we still did the pizza. We didn't hang out. We didn't really talk. And, you know, I'd sit on the couch and go to sleep, and he'd sit there and be playing euchre all the time. I used to sit next to him and watch. I taught myself how to play euchre from watching him. Went on to compete in nationals, and I became one of the world's best euchre players. I was even sponsored by Bicycle Cards. I mean, you know, I watched my father. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to learn from him. I tried so hard for his approval and just to be a part, and it felt like nothing mattered to him. It felt like everything was just repellent. I mean, he just soaked his issues in alcohol. And it was hard to see, man. It was just like, you know, he'd sit down at the computer, make a couple laughs. You know, he couldn't type for shit either. He hunt and pecked. And the few times he would talk to me, he'd be like, hey, Dust. No, actually, he'd be like, hey, Cock. Son, how do you spell this and that? You know, he's drunk. He can't think to spell 5-letter words. And it's kind of what I was to him. And, you know, I'd watch him sometimes, I'd observe, but he would never, like, interact with me. And it got to where, as I was a little older, 10, 11, 12, that my night was I'd come over, eat pizza, and lay on the couch and do nothing. I didn't have Game Boy. I didn't do anything. I had no toys there. She would never buy me anything. She was a bitch. So during these years, what happened was I would sit on the couch, and he would turn on country music because I was not allowed to watch anything because he wanted to listen to music while he watched. So the TV can be completely occupied, too. He'd be listening to country music. The alternative was porn. Sounds weird, right? So at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, my father made me pick whether or not we're going to watch country music, CMT, or if we're going to watch porn. And he never watched it. He was facing the entire different direction. If there was he was complete 1080. He wasn't even looking at the TV, never watched. He just listened, whether or not it was porn or not. And he'd never turn around. He never would. And unless it was porn, you know, as soon as the done was done and he climaxed or whatever, he'd turn around and be like, "Oh yeah, he tore that up," or you know, that's the kind of influence I had. And whenever I tried to speak to my father about girls, he'd say, "Fuck everything you can, get all you can while you can, don't get married, love's bullshit." And that's the kind of advice I had. That's the role model. That was the male. That was my father, and he really never really did talk to me. I remember a couple happy moments, but most of it's the process. And I was depressed as a child. I was what, 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere around in that area. I was on Zoloft, on top of my ADHD medicine. Pretty bad when a 10-year-old kid gets put on some medication. I was pretty young. And I turned to turn all of my hatred, whether or not it was school, issues with my mother. The person I hated most was my father. I was never mean to him, though. I was mean to Jenny, but I never understood him. And when he got drunk was about the only time that he ever talked to me. And it's kind of bad when you get excited for your father to get drunk. You know what I mean? It's just kind of odd. And he'd sit there in that computer chair, and he wouldn't even, you know, make eye contact. He'd stay turned around. I mean, he'd get up to crack open a beer, go take a piss. He pissed 20 times a night. Went through a 24-pack a night. And that's kind of the process. That's what happened. That was the first few years of my life. I mean, up until I was about 15, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. And that's what happened. I mean, I gained a couple things out of him. My passion for gaming, cards and stuff like that. All I ever wanted was to be good enough for him. And I wanted a father. I wanted him to take me out and do things. I wanted him to help me more. But it seems like after the first few years of my life, he just gave up. And then I learned to, you know, I guess control that frustration and aim it towards my stepmother. And you know, at around 15 years old, I chose to never see my father again. And I've seen him a few times since, but it's probably 2 or 3 years since the first time. And then after that, it was probably another year or two. And it's kind of the process that we've had. I've blamed him for so much. And now being a mature adult, I understand. I understand why he did what he did. I understand the complications of a relationship. Is there an excuse for what he did and not being there for me? No. He paid $36 a month for child support for me. My mom raised me alone. That's not a man to me. It's not a man. That's a man that's lost. That's a child. And as awesome as he seemed, as much as a friend as he was when I was younger, I couldn't confide in him. I couldn't talk to him about father-son things. I wouldn't talk to him about school, girls, anything like that. A couple years in, you know, and I'd have him. He'd have to have his hush-hush voice because, you know, he'd look around, make sure his wife wasn't up. But we'd talk about Danielle. He'd swear up and down, that's my daughter. And, you know, but he couldn't do anything about it because of Ginny. And I felt that not only was I, you know, sitting there witnessing my father really wanting nothing to do with me. It wasn't until I actually hit puberty, until, you know, we had interest in girls and gambling and video games, that he even wanted anything to do with me. And his interest hopped up because we had things in common now. And at that point, I realized that it wasn't right. You skipped out the middle years of my life when I was a kid, when I needed you to help guide and prepare me for the world, and now you just want a friend, and it was something else. But that's what I have for right now. The other thing that I found out, it took quite a few years, but I also found this out when he was drunk. Like I said, truth serum. He just randomly turned around one night and said, "Hey, Dust, you might have a couple brothers and sisters you don't know about. And of course, at 2 a.m. with porn on the tube, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he says there's another, couple boys and girls, I don't know which, for example, I don't know their names. One of them's my age, another one's a couple years younger, and so on and so forth. But apparently my dad was unfaithful. He cheated on my mom with Lori, who was the mom of Danielle. He cheated on Danielle, or Lori with Jenny, and there's this other woman, I don't remember her name. And I think it's Becky. Cheated with Becky in Kentucky. He'd go down there and visit because family was down there. He'd go down and visit and knock her up every fucking time he went, apparently. And it's disgusting to know that I may have another brother or sister that's my age, and I didn't know about this till I was 10, 15 years old, something like that. Probably closer to 10, 12. And he just straight confesses this. I'm not sure if they're all mine. I'm pretty sure one or two of them are at least mine. I don't know about the third, that kind of shit. So to find out that, just randomly from your father that you may have a couple other brothers and sisters you don't know about, it's crazy. So, things got a little more complicated. Becky is the woman. She's married to this guy. He's in the army. He serves his country, goes out, deploys. He has no clue those kids are my dad's. He's been raising, supporting, and loving those children like they're his own, and he's gone his entire life thinking that those are his kids, and I think that is the worst fucking thing to do. Can you imagine going through the joys of childbirth and helping your wife through everything, and then to find out 18, 20 years later, 24 years later that, guess what? They're not even your child. They're not your kids. And, it's something else. My dad recently has wanted to open up and have me go down there and meet them. But I don't want to wreck a family. But that's not something that should be gone. That should just go underfoot. You know what I mean? That's something that should come out. But that's kind of where we're at, guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the video and the series. I'm pretty sure as of right now we're talking a little bit about my father. I'll talk a little bit more about some of my habits and influences as a kid. My grandma in the next one. And I can't wait for doing that. Shortly thereafter will be middle school. If there are any questions you guys would like to ask and you want me to sum up in the next video, feel free to drop them down in the comment section below. Like I said, guys, as a kid, I think that seriously felt it. I mean, I felt it hurt me a lot more knowing that my father was right in front of me and not wanting anything to do with me than not being able to be around him whatsoever. I would have probably much rather have just not known him than see him there with his back turned to me while he's playing cards, getting drunk, and I'm stuck watching country or porn. That's my youth, guys. That's my experiences with my father. 95% of the time when I was with him, that's what happened. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the About Me series. Like I said, any questions, feel free to send them my way. Remember to leave a rating. A lot of effort goes into these, so thanks for watching, guys. Peace out. Get it.